You see, I go for a simple way every time. I don't like complications. And for me to have the same PIN number and the same password for everything makes life simple for me.
Being chipped, it's because it's just a small thing, you know, the size of a grain of rice that you put in your hand or in your arm or whatever. It's just, I would prefer to have just all the information that I need on that one chip rather than on a card that I could lose or that could be stolen.
That's like Big Brother saying it would be a benefit to everybody to be microchipped, to be filmed.
Well, identity management's an important issue. It's important for government policy, but it's big business as well. There are huge biometric industries out there and an awful lot of players in this space. So it's really important not to make mistakes. It's not that long since we had the abandoned UK identity card because the public didn't want it. So trying to really understand the wishes of the citizen, trying to find out what they think is the cool space to develop in and where they see the taboos.
So today has been the first younger people focus group that we've had, and we've been working on the kind of scenarios that we've produced today for 6 to 12 months. So deciding which things to show people, making sure that it's something they're going to be really engaged with. Up until now it's been very theoretical, it's been very academic, and it's actually great to engage with the community and find out what people are thinking.
I found the smell technology as a way to identify somebody really interesting, because I think it can be done in a really non-intrusive way. So as a means to identify somebody instead of having to be search or some of the background checks that you'd have to go into. So I thought it was it was a really interesting way of doing it, quite innovative as well. So the thing that most kind of stood out for me in a kind of, I wouldn't really agree with that sort of way, was the QR reader for the gravestones, or a way to kind of remember somebody by, because I thought it was such a clash of tradition of placing a gravestone at a graveyard to remember somebody by, and then clashing that with such a modern thing like a QR reader just seemed a bit offensive and not a respectful way to remember somebody by, especially if anybody can read the life of the deceased. So yeah, I just thought that was a really inappropriate way of trying to remember somebody. I think there could be more sensitive ways of dealing with it. I think it's interesting to be involved in kind of the very early stages of something like this, because it means you kind of get to potentially impacts on them which you might be influenced by later in life. I think it's important to be vocal about stuff like this, especially when it's technology and that can like take over the world.
So today we had 12 younger and 12 older people participating in a focus group all about identity management. We had people all mixed up on different tables talking about different issues. A number of scenarios were presented to them, so things like QR codes on scarves, the idea of biometrics, things like the future in 20 years where we will be identifying ourselves, how will that work?
We've been talking to young people in their late teens, early 20s, and also much older people in their 70s.
You said in that discussion that you would be quite happy for a murderer to get away with a murder rather than use new technology. This new technology has been proved so good that it will eliminate the innocent.
It will eliminate them.
Yes.
I don't agree. I don't see how it can.
Well, hopefully.
Hopefully, and hopefully pigs might. Hopefully I'll win the lottery, but I will.
But you've got to go with modernisation.
From the parents' point of view, a GPS tracking system, so you know where your child is, might be quite reassuring or, quite helpful. But if my parents used that, I'm not sure they would, but I would feel a bit uneasy about that because I don't like the idea of being followed or watched or things like that.
Yes, I wouldn't like to do that. I would see that as a dreadful interference.
Yeah.
There's always like a happy balance to be struck, and I think you need a lot of common sense in this life, although it isn't actually very common. So I would, it's probably on a need to know basis, I would have probably been horrified where my kids were, 3:30 in down the town. But again, I wouldn't want to interfere with their life because they have to have personal freedom.
Oh, exactly.
You make your mistakes, and this is how you get your strength.
There's things that, children wouldn't want their parents to find out, and probably the parents wouldn't want to know. Exactly.
We would be tracked if we were microchipped.
Yes.
So there would be all this information.
That's a bad idea, yes, but I can't see.
So you would not agree with that?
No, I wouldn't agree with that. But I'm trying to understand why it's okay for animals but not for humans.
Because animals cannot talk anyway.
So?
Well, humans have a voice.
Yes, so?
Hopefully heard sometimes.
Yeah. Oh, right. So animals
will have
can't
no choice
say
whatsoever.
Anything.
They can't say...
it's wrong to inflict something on somebody just because they can't say no.
Physically, I would have no concerns about being chipped. But then it's how the information on the chip's stored. So you might have information, say, about your health, about your bank account, etc. And you could think, well, if I went into, say, hospital and I wasn't feeling fully compos mentis, if somebody had access into that chip and they were less than honest, could they get access into my bank account? So I think it was access and levels of access really that concern me.
Yeah, it would have to be a question of, you know, who is actually able to access it, and do you trust them? But I'd be a bit concerned about if people could put skimmers on the machines
and copy them.
Yeah, like sometimes people
as they do now
with ATMs now. And I think that would be my only concern with it.
I think a single source is would be a lot easier to handle rather than all the cards that we've got now. Because even though, say, I don't have a lot of like store cards and things, it's amazing how many cards you do actually acquire within quite a short time.
I like the idea of the other ways of getting your identity and stuff like that, instead of all the passwords, because you said you always had the same password for everything.
Same password, same PIN number.
Which I used to do that, and then like I figured out it's probably not the best scenario, because if you get one password for something, then you've got everything.
Yeah.
So I like the idea of fingerprints, or like the eye scan thing, or face recognition. You can do that anyway now. Maybe it's not for everything, but like I'd like to be able to get up one day and not have to take a purse with us, and just have put my finger on a machine and put my pin in, and I've got some money.
Talking to the people in my group this afternoon about the future and what might happen in 2030, as an example, people found it quite difficult to envisage what might occur in the future. They couldn't really envisage what would happen in their daily lives. They couldn't think about detail. Things like hover cars and monorail were suggested, but it was very much based on futuristic films.
I found that they've struggled to focus on identity until we really started to talk about relationships. So when I was asking about the family relationships in the future and how much you would want to monitor your child's behaviour, for instance, then some of the interesting things came out, and they started to talk about coming home to a house where the house recognised you as you walked up the street, and the house was prepared for you, the right temperature, etc. But it was interesting because that then provoked a discussion about how dependent upon the technology, dependent upon the electricity grid, etc., the right power sources, all of that would be.
A lot of the people I spoke to today were concerned about control, about the government knowing too much, and a number of times 1984 was mentioned. And people really felt that some of those things mentioned in the book were sort of coming to life now, whereas other people were saying, well, actually, no, we've moved forwards, computers storing lots of information is what we have now, we can't sort of go back against that. So there were sort of clashes. Both young and older people were sort of saying both sides of the story. They liked the future, they liked things being stored. That was the only way we could see things happening. Other people were sort of reverting back and saying, in my day we didn't have this, we didn't have that, and actually I'm being excluded from a number of different activities because I don't have a computer, I don't have a phone, I can't have the same access to things as younger people that embrace technology do.
Yeah, some of the younger people in my group were demonstrating some of the things they had. So, for instance, one young girl had Ping It on her phone, was able to send money to her friends, etc. And she got the phone out and demonstrated it to some of the older people in the group. And they were really quite impressed about the capability. But they didn't have a smartphone, and, they couldn't imagine how they would be able to set up a network with their friends and use the same kind of system.
The thing that's kind of struck me today is how much common ground there was. I thought in a lot of ways the young ones would be a lot more blasé about things, but they seem to share a lot of the concerns that, say, I would perhaps have naturally.
I think a lot of young people are quite concerned about internet safety and, how much people know about you from looking online. But I think it's mainly to do with how much information you actually give away yourself.
Some of the participants in the group today were asking me about the policy implications of the work we're doing, who will find out about it. And that's a really interesting question, because there are a number of players in this field, a number of stakeholders. I mean, obviously the government is a big one with their identity assurance programme. But there are also a number of industries working, say, in biometrics or in future identity management technologies that could make mistakes. What do people want to see? What do the citizens want to see in their future? And then we can talk to the other stakeholders, we can talk to government, we can talk to business and say, right, this is what people would like to see. What are the business opportunities in this space? The Imprints project is funded by the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council and GCHQ in the UK and the Department of Homeland Security in the US.